You're watching Service Drive, exclusively on CBT News.
Service advisors and techs both depend on data, yet most dealers are spending hours every week building reports that tell them what already happened. Historical data is not going to cut it today, folks. So joining us now is Todd Katcher, Chief Product Officer at Digital Dealership System, to talk about how digital leaderboards are transforming the way dealerships track performance. Thanks so much, Todd, for joining us on the show once again.
Always a pleasure to talk technology with you.
Sure. Walk us through what the digital leaderboards look like on the ground and what our teams and customers actually seeing. I know this has really been like transformative for so many dealers.
Yeah, so we tried to solve the problem in dealerships and fixed ops where service and techs are not being updated regularly because the teams are just too busy. Yeah. So the average advisor is doing about 100 to 150 ROs a month, and busy stores are doing 4,000, 5,000 ROs a month. So the idea of being able to look at a report on a daily, weekly, monthly basis is just not cutting it. And so if you set intentions for your team, you set goals for your team, then how do you track that when they're going through so many people in a given time? And for techs, your techs are often in another building. So how do you communicate with them effectively? So a lot of dealers have ways of doing it, and we wanted to digitize that. So we created the Fixed Ops Leaderboard a couple of years ago, and we worked with some of the top fixed ops directors across the country to go ahead and create reports that are automatically updated directly from the DMS every 15 minutes. And we show those on large screens so the staff can see it and they know where they're tracking, where they're trending, and how their attitude and performance meets their bottom line, because a lot of them are compensated whether on hourly or their hours that they have, or the gross that they do, or the numbers of ROs, or their saturation numbers. They're compensated based on that. So they need to know those numbers daily, if not every minute throughout the day. So that's what we do.
That's fantastic, and I've seen it work firsthand at some dealerships. So how does it help reduce the time that a dealer spends building reports?
Yeah, I was speaking with a dealer yesterday and he said, yeah, it takes me about 30 minutes a day to go ahead and build the reports. Well, most DMSs don't have reports that these guys want to see, so they have to manipulate the data. They either have to download the data and then into a CSV file, and then they have to put it into another form, or they're using Google Sheets and they have to transpose that information from one computer to the other. And they'll spend a half hour a day. So they're like, oh, it's not that much time. And as you look at it, that's 5-6 hours a week, depending on the week. And then they're spending 4 hours in a closeout report. So as an owner or as a general manager, when you're looking at how your team is spending time, do you want them to be spending their time building reports on a regular basis? Or do you want them to go ahead and be there managing their team and interacting with their team and have those reports available throughout the day? If they see value in those reports, why aren't they shared more often? Right. And that's something that dealers have not been able to answer.
Let's talk about metrics. What are some of the key reports dealers are loving the most?
We separated into two different areas. You have the advisors where they're looking at gross numbers. The latest one that we've built reports for is the saturation number. So you could take a particular part code or an op code and group them together to know how many alignments you're doing, or how many brakes you're doing, or how many additives you're selling, and then we set goals based on that within the system. Then when we move over to the techs who are wrenching all day long, they don't have time to look at reports on a desktop. They're not standing behind a computer all day long. So by having it on a big screen, they're paid based on their hours and efficiency, effective labor rate, and also they get paid oftentimes weekly or based on their weekly productivity. So we break down their hours based on weeks numbers, so they could see how they're performing on a weekly basis, and then that goes ahead and impacts their bottom line for the store and the paycheck for the individuals working there.
Yeah. So from a leadership perspective, how are GMs and fixed ops directors using this data to coach teams more effectively and recognize top performers within the group?
Yeah, so we made it real easy. DMSs and CRMs for service are extremely complicated. And the tools that are out there that GMs use from some great companies are extremely complicated as well. Not only do they show past data, but they really don't drill down to the individual staff members, because that's not what they're designed to do. They're designed to look at the macro. Ours, we're designed to go ahead and make it very simple. So on one page, they could go ahead and look at how they're doing ROs month to month, their sales month to month. They could load hours month to month, and they could go in and dig into the individual numbers and then dig into each of the staff members and look at those same numbers to figure out how they're performing month over month. And maybe they're slacking, and you could show them the real numbers of, hey, last month you had 150 ROs and your average dollar per RO was 250, and now you're down ROs and you have less dollar per RO. What's going on?
That's right.
Because every dollar per RO, think about the numbers. So the average advisor is going to do between 100 and 150 ROs in a month. And if the average, let's just say that they do 100 ROs and their average per RO is $250. That means they bring in $25,000 in sales to the store. If you incentivize them to actually sell $15 more on the average, that winds up being an extra $1,500 more that the dealership makes just by adding that little $15 in. And now you can incentivize them. Maybe you give them $100 for that extra amount, and now the dealership makes an extra $1,400 net off of that, just by providing an incentive and building culture in the store that impacts the advisor's bottom line as well as the store's bottom line.
Yeah, I did have the pleasure of speaking to one of your clients that are on the boards now in a previous interview that I did on Service Drive. And he mentioned to me what he liked. They have 10 stores in the chain, I might add. What he liked was that he's walking around with all that information right on his hip in real time. So he whether he's at a lunch or whether he takes the day off or whether he's sitting in his office and he just wants to check on how the dealerships are performing in real time, not historical data, he's got it right on his hip or on his laptop. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's real easy for dealers to go ahead and get bogged down by reports of yesterday's productivity. What our system wants to do is give today's productivity, so that way they know how the store's performing. When a GM calls a fixed ops manager or a fixed ops director and says, hey, how are we doing? They don't want to know how they did yesterday. They want to know how they're doing today.
That's right.
They want to know how they're doing compared to last month.
Yeah.
Hey, we're even in ROs, but we're down in revenue. You know, we had in some incentives change. They want to know the why. And so they want to know the real-time numbers, because dealers have access to all these beautiful reports from their CRM or DMS or other tools that are out there. What we want to provide is quick and easy information that allows them to get the metrics so that they could answer that question. So when that fixed ops director calls the store, or that fixed ops director or that GM calls and says what's happening, they know real quick without having to dive into all the numbers. It's very easy to use, and it's, like you said, it's mobile friendly, and it goes ahead and shows them those key metrics that they're most important to dealers.
Many of my viewers know that I should have an actual category filed under no-brainer. This happens to be one of those products, folks, and one of those services that is a no-brainer. And you've heard me say that before about certain items that we've talked about here on the show. And as you know, we don't really endorse any particular product, but I will tell you that I don't know of anyone else in this space. So if you do not have a provider of that, which I don't think you probably do, you got to reach out to Todd Katcher and get these up and running in your store. I'm telling you, you can thank me later. You can thank me at NADA when I see you, but you got to do something in this area. Bring your fixed ops department into the 21st century. So Todd Katcher, Chief Product Officer at Digital Dealer System. Thank you so much. It's always great catching up. I love this kind of information for our dealers. So thanks so much.
Thanks again, Jim. Have a great day.
Thanks.
Thanks for watching Service Drive, exclusively on CBT News.